welcome everyone. This is Iffat Gill, a founder of The Code to Change. And I am joined today by Semra Çelebi and Giada Sabbion. And we are very happy today to launch this new talk show series called Show Me the Money. To give you a little bit of background about why we launched this program, which is going to feature tech founders from underrepresented communities and some investor profiles who are really committed to the cause of diversity and inclusion. What we found during our research in the last year is certain problems that keep coming back when we talk about gender lens investing. And this talk show series is going to be a further investigation into that topic. And at the same time, we're also going to highlight some of the role models from the ecosystem, from the Dutch ecosystem, who are doing excellent work to address this. So it is an honor for me to introduce today's amazing speakers. Let's start with Semra. Semra is the lead of female entrepreneurship and women in tech with Startup Amsterdam. She's also the founder of Female Works, which is a diversity and inclusion consultancy. And she has worked for City of Amsterdam for more than 10 years. And within her role as project manager, she has led the efforts for female entrepreneurship. And I'm not going to speak too much more about it, but I would like to because we also want to hear from her, but we would like to highlight that prior to her current position, Semra has worked as a policy advisor and diversity and inclusion, and she worked directly with the city mayor of Amsterdam. And let's go to Giada. Giada is currently working on a project called Gulliver, Shuri Meets Gulliver, I'm sorry. And she is an independent diversity and inclusion professional. She's a huge advocate for that. We'll hear a little bit more from her in just a while. So let's start with Semra. Semra, if you could tell us a little bit about your career journey, a little bit about yourself.
Hello, so I'm Semra. I work for the City of Amsterdam now for 12 years already. I did several things, started as a public affairs officer, and then took the leap to a diversity and inclusion department as a policy advisor. I was there for 7 years, did several topics, anti-discrimination on the labor market, but also LGBTIQ rights. And after that, I took the leap to Amsterdam in business. And I helped foreign companies with a soft landing in the Amsterdam area. And then I realized at that moment, that was like 1.5 years ago, I did a search on what my purpose is in life. It was quite a long journey. I think it took me a year to realize that I really want to put effort to help women reach their full potential. And then I saw this, like suddenly the universe opened the doors and I saw this vacancy for female entrepreneurship and women in tech. And I just took the leap and said to the manager, you have to give me this job. And so I started that journey with where I created the project, where it is now. Do you want me to elaborate on it now?
Let's do that in a little bit. Let me just do a brief intro with Giada, and then we will jump right into what you have actually done, because it's amazing. I really wanted to hear more about that. Let's go to Giada. Giada, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing right now.
So let's see if I can keep it short. I'm not well known for that, but essentially at its core, I'm a trained anthropologist. I entered diversity and inclusion from a little bit of I guess, an unorthodox point of view. But as an anthropologist, I very much am looking at cultural issues from the lens of identity politics and the mechanisms of community and how belonging works and othering also works, that I hope to maybe we have a chance to go into that a little bit. Over the past year, I've worked on a project called Fundright, an initiative actually called Fundright, which aims at expanding the role of women in entrepreneurship, or actually including women in entrepreneurship. So this was initiated by the VC world here in the Netherlands, who sort of recognized that not a lot of investment was going towards female founders, and so they wanted to do something to work towards that. And but that my involvement in that has come to a close, and I've now sort of entered, as you mentioned, a role setting up or developing an initiative called Shuri Meets Gulliver, and that sort of expands beyond the scope of gender inclusion, and also beyond sort of into other types of inclusion of underrepresented identities, and really to make sure that, or to help their participation in the entrepreneurial field. So it's very much entrepreneur focused, indeed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to asking you the rest of my questions. And in terms of, I think I would like to start with some of the statistics. And maybe you, because you are both experts in your field, Semra with female entrepreneurship, and Giada more on broader underrepresented communities in this arena. So what is the situation on the ground, Semra? And then I would love to hear more about how you have achieved. I'm referring to the RISE project, of course, the RISE program. So please tell us a little bit more about what is the situation on the ground and what led to this program, and how did it, where are we now?
So basically, it's that was one of the biggest surprises for me in the beginning, that we didn't have that much data on this whole topic, especially like when it comes to the Amsterdam area. There are international researchers that say that the Netherlands is at a very low, like I think on the 38th place when it comes to gender equal on the workplace. So that was one of the researches. But that, and then also when it comes to funding, female founded companies only get like 1.8% of the funding in the Netherlands, and then 5% for mixed teams, founding teams. So those numbers are there, and this is a huge difference when it comes to compared to male founders. And there we saw a huge gap. Also, the huge shortage of talent in the tech industry, and then so that's the first shortage, and then female talent is even a bigger shortage that we see. But the products that we are creating at the moment, and especially for the future, are all in tech. So if we don't have mixed teams that create those products, then we have a huge problem in adapting to the market. And that's why we as a government feel the responsibility to take a leading role in this. And that's how we started basically the whole project of RISE. I realized that when I started this job, that I didn't have a huge budget, but I did know that there was somewhere in the city of Amsterdam, there was a budget where I could maybe help the entrepreneurs of RISE who had the idea of a female hub, help them to get subsidy from that pot of money that the city had. So basically, I went further than my own description of my job. But it did work out. It was a very long journey because it's a big amount of money, of course, and it's community money. You have to be really responsible, and it takes a long time. It's like European funding. You have to like get into the bureaucratic process. But because I work for such a long time for the city, I do know easier to dive into that. And but the people who are behind RISE, the entrepreneurs, are so super dedicated. The team is so passionate about the topic. Combined with myself, I realized, and I didn't expect that during this journey, it was not easy because there are so many rules that we had to obey to, but because I was so passionate, I believe, I met so many colleagues that helped me so much. And like, even if we had to work in the evening or in the weekends, and that was very, for me, it was a super inspiring journey to experience that, and to just, go for it and believe in yourself, because there are also a lot of people who didn't believe in it, that we could actually succeed. But now we got 750K from the city of Amsterdam only for the coming 3 years, to support the female ecosystem when it comes to women in tech and female entrepreneurs. And this is how we hope, from the government point of view also, to first of all put the topic on the agenda, keep it on the agenda, and get the other stakeholders to dive into it as well, like corporates.
Amazing. And Semra, has something like this happened before? That this amount of funding has been released for this specific cause?
No. That was also like, that's also an interesting thing that, I mean, it was such a journey when we had to, we were interviewed by all these commissions at the city of Amsterdam that asked us the questions that they had to ask, but it felt so, because like, it's not an artificial intelligence lab or, all the other topics that are also very important. But because it's a diversity and inclusion topic, and I worked for that department for such a long time, it has always and still is seen as a CSR project, as a thing like, okay, but like, how important is it? Why should we help these women? Why? So we had to put a lot of data, which we didn't have. We didn't have all the data, but we had ourselves and our stories, and we just put out everything on the table. But we did succeed at the end, and it's definitely it's the first time that for this topic it's only one little. I mean, it's quite a little target group if you compare it to a lot of the other projects. So it's definitely a first, and that's also what I get back from the ecosystem.
Well, Semra, congratulations on that success, and we hope that this pot expands in the future as well, and it does bring a lot of impact and a lot of results. Thank you so much for sharing that. Giada, we will come to you now. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been. I know that you've been working with the VC and that funding ecosystem. What has your experience been on that front?
I wanted to actually...
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, I think there's a small delay. I actually wanted to start with a small question for Semra with regards to the data that you just shared, and you just said that you had to present a lot of data with regards to this topic to get the funding, and you mentioned some figures. I have some knowledge of some figures and also where they come from. Where did you get the number of sort of the 1% and the 4% that goes towards women?
That's a good question. That was one of the research that was presented at that time. That was like 1.5 years ago, I think, by Janneke Niese and Eva de Mol.
Oh, right. Okay. Then we were talking about the same statistics. Okay, good. I was just checking. Now, the reason why I
good
but I think it's important to note that Semra did mention that it was a huge challenge to get the most accurate data, because there wasn't a lot of reliable sources on what the data is and what the figures are like at this moment, unfortunately.
And that's why it's one of our pillars of RISE at the moment, to gather data. We're now talking to researchers to start to build new data on it, for at least at first for the Amsterdam area.
Yeah, and indeed, and that's exactly what I wanted to go into, in the sense that I think that the figures are low are undeniable. That is definitely the case. But what's really a challenge, and what I've noticed, is indeed the figures that we have received are very much based on what is publicly available, what has been voluntarily shared, which is often selective by the ecosystem. And so one of the challenges that I've noticed is indeed getting an accurate snapshot of what the situation is. And at the moment, it's very much based on the goodwill of certain investors to share this information. But in my experience, the goodwill is unfortunately not enough. And it really limits the amount of transparency and accountability that we can then put towards our ecosystem, and also, parties like in whichever initiatives they are, to actually sort of make strides, because it always then results in the steps or that we take being questionable, or there's, people can challenge it very easily, unfortunately. So to strengthen the case is one of the, I think, the first things that I would really start with. And sorry, what was the other part of your question?
So so how, I wanted to understand a little bit about what's happening on that front, on the VC funding, in terms of underrepresented group of schools, and what in addition to what's the situation right now, what do you think is lacking other than data?
Yeah, so beyond data and what the situation is, so I've spoken to, I lost count of the amount of VCs that I've spoken to, both that are involved and both that are not involved in Fund Right. What you will hear is that no matter who you speak to, everyone is in favor of diversity and is in favor of female entrepreneurship. What that actually means in practice is varies greatly, like astronomically different, so I have spoken to VCs who have said, I want to invest in women, I believe in it, I just don't, the women don't approach us, or the ones that do are not of the quality that we are interested in. And at the same time, within the same ecosystem, I speak to another VC that says, hey, well, the last 3 investments that I made were actually all investments in women, and we received lots of applications from women, right? So I can let the viewers sort of draw their own conclusions about what that might mean with respects to how the concept or perception of where the problem lies differs within the VC community, and how that is seen, and then perhaps which active or proactive steps some parties are willing to take compared to others. And this really applies to not only the VC world, but the corporate world. And there's this discrepancy wherever you look. I think the biggest underestimation is how big the challenge is, or how big the process of actually implementing inclusive practices is. I think I was thinking about how to present this yesterday in my head, and I apologize for the terrible, if it's a terrible analogy, but if you think about a textbook, right, and you want to update when you have a school textbook, let's say scientific textbook, sometimes you get like the first, the second, the third edition, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're always updating the same textbook. Bear with me with this analogy. But what that means is that when you're inputting new information each year, it has to fit within the context of that same narrative that you have started off with. What does that mean is that whichever new information you're adding is subject to some sort of compromise or shifting to fit the narrative that already exists. So the same thing applies with diversity and inclusion in companies or in VCs. So when organizations sort of approach people to say, oh, I want to do a diversity and inclusion training, it's very much just adding to the same, just an add-on to the existing culture, right, to the existing system, rather than what is really needed is a brand new book, like full transformation. So it's not about just adding pieces here and there and like adding information, changing it there, because ultimately, as I said, another thing that I've noticed is whenever information is shared with parties that are interested in being more diverse, it's not actually ever applied in the way that the consultants or that experts recommend, because it's always or often adapted to fit the way of being of that environment. And it's bigger than an individual company or an individual department. It's actually ecosystem wide or just I would say societal wide, even if we want to take a broader lens. So I think the work, there's a lot of how to say fatigue on this subject. People get really, but the thing is, what you said, Semra, about keeping it on the agenda is very important, because I think people can fall into the trap of thinking that, and often I've heard it, that we've made it or that they have understood it. And really what I've come to realize is that actually it's far from understood, and much more work. The reality of how much work needs to be fully realized. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very, very accurate analogy that you used. Instead of just updating the existing books, we might need to, write a new book here, because otherwise what we're doing, as I understand from you, is we're trying to fit people into the same old narrative, but with just, few slight tweaks here and there to look more diverse, probably. Semra, what is your opinion on that? And that you've just launched this huge program, which was, it's a huge shift, but at the same time, I'm sure you also had to come, across some of those existing narratives as well.
Yeah, definitely. Giada is so right in her analysis. It's, I think it reminded me much more of my experience when I worked as a policy advisor on the topic. And you see that a lot of companies are, we want to have more diversity, so let's do a training here and a training there, and then we can change the whole system. But it doesn't work like that. If you want to create a company that's more diverse and inclusive, then you need to really redefine your mission and vision. You need to redefine your values. And that's such a huge change and a lot of people are afraid of change, and they still don't see it. That's the biggest problem, I think, as a profit thing. Because they don't see it as a profit thing, they still are very late in seeing that, because you have enough change managers that dive into companies, change the whole freaking company in order to create more profitable products. Because then you see that they do it, they are open for it, because their goal is the profit goal. And in this topic, the whole loss is still that people don't see it, companies don't see it as a profit thing, that they don't realize that Generation Z, who is growing up right now, is of 25% in the Netherlands already has one of the parents with a migrant background. And if you want to create products for the future, for them and for the future generation, you need to do this. And that's still, because we talk about this topic still too much from an angle of corporate social responsibility, it's good for society, then it will still be seen as a soft topic, as a voluntary thing. Like, oh, it's good to know you. Yes, we have a diverse, And then still, I mean, even working for the government, I have been a junior director when I was like 8 years ago, with 3 directors, which was a huge chance for me, for example, to, you know, experience a huge organization top down. But basically, when I look back at that experience, I was there at the table, but I wasn't, because I was me. There wasn't an ask to me what I thought about it or what my opinion was. It was basically like, yeah, you have to learn from us how we do it. I know that wasn't the intention, but that was the way it went. And I was just too young to put that on the table. And I think also like too young and too overwhelmed and too afraid. But yeah, so that's basically, okay, we're very diverse, but we're definitely not inclusive.
Right. And that's a very important difference. Like, yes, how diverse are we? And then how inclusive are we? Those are 2 very separate things. Coming to that angle, Giada, you tell us a little bit more about the future plans you have as you're working now with Shuri Meets Gulliver. Tell us a little bit about this network and what the goal is, because it's a very interesting community. I would love to hear more about it from you.
Yes, so it's still very so at a seed early stages. It's still very conceptual, and to be honest, well, we haven't actually really announced anything. It's still relatively informal. However, having said that, for an informal group, it's very organized, and indeed the people within it are from all walks of life, but all very much connected with this theme of entrepreneurship. And yes, it goes beyond the element of gender, and it's really to do with, I like to call it, and then, you know, how we define this is often changing, but underrepresented identities, right? And we have a vast amount of these who are either professionals in the field of DEI, or aspiring entrepreneurs, or gatekeepers and the such. And really what the goal is with this group is, it sort of started off as sharing of experiences group, but it sort of evolved into a social group where we can help each other with social capital. Because often what happens with people who are sort of underrepresented is they don't tend to have access to the same, well, normally it's economic capital, but also social capital as like the dominant culture might have, right? But what we have here is a group of professionals, right, and people who are aspiring all together. So it's a sort of like putting your hand back and bringing those who are want to move forward, bringing them forward with you, and giving back, and lifting each other up, and giving each other access to to these fields that are normally quite there are sort of obstacles for different identities generally to enter. On the other hand, what it also serves as is as a sort of sounding group for potential solutions, and this involves solutions or parties like you, Semra, and the ministry and the government to come up with concrete proposals of how this of how we can include. And again, this is not from a CSR standpoint, trying to move beyond that CSR element and trying to really provide the economic and say, hey, there is when we think of future proofing, when we think of capacity building, there is so much untapped potential and untapped economic sort of growth based on the fact that there are certain obstacles that these groups face to entering the entrepreneurial scene. And we try as a collective to come up with practical recommendations about how we could overcome this. And this has got to do again with what you're referring to, Semra, about, you know, not listening to what's perhaps the government or other established parties might say, oh, well, we think that you would benefit from this. Or we say, well, actually, we think that what we need is XYZ because, well, we know what we're missing and we know the challenges that we're facing. So that's a little bit about what the group is really trying to do and trying to achieve.
Excellent. And this is a question, my next question is for both of you in terms of recommendations or what needs to change. We talk a lot about, when we started working here as Code to Change in Amsterdam, a lot of pressure was put on these underrepresented groups, for example, women. They need to do better. They need to be more confident. They need to be more visible. You know, the lean in methodology, everything. The whole burden of being out there was put on women, right? We all know this. But then we started to learn that, okay, no, it's, you know, what we are doing basically is sending these underrepresented women or other groups into the same toxic environment, work culture, where they're not accepted. So the change also needs to be from that perspective as well, from the employer side as well, that they need to make this you know, inclusive environment for these people to thrive. And now we're also talking a lot about the whole ecosystem needs to work on, and at the same time, there needs to be more action from the government as well. In your opinion, where do you think is the best place to start? I know there's a lot of work going on as well, but you know, if we want to see change within the next year or a couple of years, where do you think the change needs to start? Is it at policymaking level, or is it more on the industry level? And let's start with Semra, especially since what you achieved, Semra, with Rise, phenomenal. I would like to ask you, what would you do, you know, in terms of long-term goals? Like, where would you go then to, because I know Semra is not stopping here, right? She achieved this. She's not stopping here for sure. So I'm very curious to hear about that.
I do believe that it always starts on a policy level. So you need to create this, you know, you need to create a how do you say that in English? A cadre from where you put it into practice and operationalize it. If we wouldn't have a diversity and inclusion chapter, I couldn't have done this project. That's basically how it goes. So, I mean, it always goes both ways. That's also what I did when I worked at the topic of discrimination in the labor market. On the one hand, you have the target group, young people who want to have a job, who maybe need different skills than they are used to. And on the one hand, you have the system that you want to change, and the system can be employers or other stakeholders. So I do believe, and that's what I see at the City of Amsterdam, there is a huge shift in how the city government is operating. We have a program that's called democratization, that tells that basically pushes the policy advisors, the policy making people, not to just write their policies, but to do it together with the communities. Write the policies together with the communities first. Go and ask the communities what they need, what are the challenges, what are the gaps, instead of that's what you see a lot of on a larger scope. So you need to do it together. There's just one government that finds a solution for you. That's just not the way it works. And then your solution will never work in the end. What I do see that still, it's very easy to point out to the women, the other underrepresented groups, to you need to change yourself, but that because then you can be part of us. So that's again not inclusive. The employers need to change themselves in order to make other people feel like they belong to your company, that they have the feeling that they are part of your company. So if you have Muslim employees, don't only organize bottles with alcohol. Try to organize also other things so that they have the feeling that they belong and not that they have to fit in all your bottles. It's a culture that we have in the Netherlands, but
the networking drinks, yes, the
networking drinks. And there are so many colleagues. We had this project when I worked at the diversity department. There are so many Muslim colleagues who do not realize that the biggest deals are closed during these bottles. And that is a fact. If we don't talk about this, then they won't be part of the company. They don't feel like they belong, and they won't grow in that company. So those are little changes, very little small changes that companies even can make for their employees to feel like they belong, or their future employees. So yeah, but it's because it's such a sensitive topic. It's still, we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I do have hope. When I look at the city now, the last 2 or 3 years, there's definitely a shift. I lost my hope at a certain point when I worked for so long as a policy advisor on this topic. I definitely had a moment where I lost my hope. But I see so much changes happening now, also in the internal organization, that I do believe that there is a change going on.
You, Semra, mentioned something really vital and really important. For those of us who are joining or will be watching us later, we are discussing today the Code to Change new show, Show Me the Money, which is part of our program called the Code to Invest. And we are exploring here the diversity and inclusion in the Dutch funding ecosystem. And what you just mentioned, Semra, about the biggest deals closing in those networking, unofficial events, which people always think is either optional, not all people, of course, but especially women, because they, due to other responsibilities, of course, particularly care responsibilities, they can't even afford to go to those borrels, as we are calling it in Dutch. And this is why a lot of those people miss certain very key opportunities of growth within their roles. And so thank you so much for sharing this. This is really important, I feel. Giada, how do you feel about where do we need to go next, and where is the key, thing that the change needs to start? What level, in your opinion?
Oh, this is a huge question. I wanted to quickly react to and expand on what Semra said and what you were saying about, especially, when you're saying about the Muslim communities and being inclusive with not including alcohol, I think, and this really translates in so many ways. If I think of, let's think about the VC world, right? And essentially how I would describe that is what you were describing is assimilation. So right now, what is really highly valued in the ecosystem that we're looking at, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, is fitting in, right? Yes, basically, fitting in with the current way of doing things, rather than valuing, as you're saying, being inclusive is not getting with the program, sort of changing and adapting to other people's needs, and sort of is almost, it's not said explicitly, of course, but it's, people not getting with the program and not being able to fit in. Well, this is how we do it in Holland. We have borrels, and can't you just, why aren't you integrating, and why aren't you having borrels with us? And and it's similar with women about the narrative there is women are not risk takers. That's what I hear a lot in the VC world. And if only women learned to be more assertive and then this is something that we've in this field have come across. How it does differ for women compared to the situation that you described, Semra, is that when it comes to being the element of risk taking, I do not believe, and there are enough examples in history to show that this is just simply rubbish, that women are not risk takers. But at the same time, and men are not inherently better at business. They are just provided the social context to be able to learn to behave. It's a learned quality, personality trait. And there are men who are not risk takers because they've not perhaps been exposed to an environment that fosters that personality trait. So women have less opportunity in the current, and unfortunately I'm going to use this taboo word, I don't know if it's taboo, but in the current patriarchal society, because it's still alive and kicking, the patriarchy. And when I say patriarchy, it doesn't need to sound so heavy. It's just it means a system whereby the dominant, whereby women are excluded systematically, and that is just there are enough examples of how that still exists in today's climate, so we can I can confidently say that it still exists in throughout our systems, right? So. So one thing that I would encourage people or aspiring women to realize is that this mentality of, especially within the VC world, of women being, less risk takers still exists. I've heard it many times. So be aware of that. And also be aware of that even in VCs that are diversity and inclusion friendly, because they understand this phenomena, because although it's not inherently true, women are not biologically less risk takers, but culturally they statistically they have learned this trait. Therefore, it's likely that they are, will take a more realistic perspective towards a situation, or basically a worse deal. And VCs know this. VCs make money. Well, their goal is to make money. They will take it, or if they have the opportunity, they will take the opportunity. They will take advantage of this character trait, right? To give you perhaps a worse deal than men. So the next step, I would say, is, first of all, we need to be able to accurately measure how much investment in fact goes to women. And then at a next step, once we're more evolved, hopefully, is to also see the quality of the deals between men and women. I have a hypothesis that it's probably going to be discrepancies within this, because that these structures will take advantage of that reality. Then in terms of the second part of your question, Iffat, about how this, what needs to be changed, I think it's multifaceted. There's not one silver bullet. I completely agree with Semra. Policy is, or governmental high level, is extremely important. There needs to be incentives. Right now, everything is nice to have. And as I said, goodwill based. But if there are structural incentives for organizations, businesses, VCs, etc., to do better, then that is the first step. The second element is actually from a grassroots level, is indeed keeping the pressure there, and we need to expect more as a society, right? I worked on a project with the US, right? So the US has their own issues, and I really don't like comparing very much. However, one thing that stood out to me is we had to organize a number of panels, and the US group demanded and if we brought forward a panel that were all white and all men, they were super uncomfortable with that reality, right? This was with the US government. So at a governmental level, it was the expectation was set, and it was clear, and it was so clear that their policy officers or their civil servants would actually feel quite embarrassed to see a lineup of homogeneous people. We should have that same expectation in our society if we want to keep pressure. And yes, and of course the expectation in government level is also built upon the fact that in society they have that expectation, right? So as a society and as a grassroots level, we should keep that expectation. We should expect more, basically, of the organizations that are going to create this change.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe that the government has a leading role in this. and that people who are in key places, key figures, if they start to reject those kinds of homogeneous panels, etc., then things will change, because that's the reason why those civil servants, for example, don't accept it, because they know that they will, get to hear it from their upper level management. And that's basically the way this awareness needs to start. It needs to be a little bit more, pressurized, instead of the freewheely way it is still right now. I do see much more change in that, but there are not a lot of people who are still aware in that sense. I mean, me as a person, I'm very exceptional at that. When there's a vacancy, I ask how many people have a different background, how many women are there, who's applying for the job, who's in the commission, who's going to do the interviews. But I'm still an exception in that.
Yeah. And is the trend catching on now, Semra?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have, for example, a new director at the Department of Economical Affairs. It's a very important department. And I actually had a one-on-one conversation with him because he asked for it. And that's new to me, to be, first of all, seen. And second of all, that he actually asked me, like, can you give me any tips when it comes to diversity and inclusion? How I can, be more inclusive within the organization. So that was such an opening thing. And also the fact that he congratulated the Muslim community with the Ramadan, that he was aware of it happening. So tomorrow, that for me, it was the first. Can you imagine? So I worked for the city for 12 years now. Yeah. And it was the first time that I'm hearing these things. And yeah, for me, that says a lot. I mean, I was in the first place disappointed that we had a white male director again. And I really respect him a lot, but it doesn't matter how you look. It matters in how you look at the world. That's the important thing.
Wow. I think for me, you've opened a huge window of hope and opportunity by sharing those stories and those successes. So it always, I mean, as a nonprofit who's been working on this topic for a long time, specifically on women's economic empowerment, we at some point, like you said, giving up, you used the term.
Yeah.
We just feel like, oh my God, will this ever end? Or are we just continue struggling? Because we've been at it for a long time. But really, hearing insights from you, Semra and Giada, I mean, this has really been, it does give me sense of hope that there is a lot going on. Of course, we have a long way to go. Apparently, due to the COVID crisis, the duration to achieve gender equality has increased tremendously, which is such a sad thing, which means we need to make, we need to double our efforts, maybe triple, if we want to go towards gender equality in all walks of lives, for people from all different backgrounds. So I'm once again, thank you so much for joining us today in the first episode of Show Me the Money talk show series for our program, The Code to Invest. We hope to feature a lot of wonderful speakers in the next 12 episodes. We hope to feature 6 founders from underrepresented backgrounds. In this series, we're focusing on female founders, since that was mostly the very strong focus for Code to Change. And we're focusing some really promising investors or investor firms who are very committed to the cause of diversity and inclusion. It has been an honor for me to kick off this series with you both. And if you have any concluding remarks, please let me know. I would like to also invite some of the people who have joined us in the audience, if you have any questions. I do see comment from Ansa Bekus. Welcome, Ansa, about, I think she's talking about her organization, InvestNL. She says that for them the finance, their shareholders, for all of them, diversity has been very high on the agenda, and also from the political level, which is really important. I think this is when people can take action, when there is, when it trickles down, when there are strong policies in place to address this. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank my team, my wonderful team. Most of them are also part of this call today, especially Mira and Halima and Omar, who are joining us. Thank you so much for all the hard work to put this together. And for those who will be watching us later, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, we'll make sure that we leave the links to their LinkedIn profiles and the projects that they're working on in our profile links or the comment section. So please do look out. And if you have any questions for us, please do follow us or look us up on social media. We'll be very happy to hear from you if you want to join this program. I think with this, I'll open the floor to our panelists if there are any concluding remarks before I close.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity. It was super inspiring to have this conversation with the two of you, Giada and Iffat. Thank you so much. And I wish you good luck with the series.
Thank you so much, Semra. Thank you.
Yeah, no, likewise. I really, really enjoyed this. And I do have small closing remarks. I hope it doesn't take too long. I just really wanted to share them because I was thinking about what to share with the community. I really want to share as much knowledge, and some of it people will know, some of it won't. But in terms of closing remarks, I would really like to encourage all female entrepreneurs or all entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups to really claim your space and find your allies. They are out there. The reality is it is a little harder for us or for people from these groups, but there are allies. There are people like Semra, people like Iffat, and there are places that will support you. And don't think that or don't be discouraged by the fact that it's a little harder, because there are people like these groups that'll make it a little bit easier. Also, if you do make it, don't sort of try and avoid to fall into the gap of the assimilation. Do give back to those who are trying to come up behind you, and try and be as brave as possible to not uphold the sort of what we were talking about, the classic textbook. Try and rewrite the textbook. And then any businesses that are might be listening, or organizations, really don't underestimate the work that it takes to truly be diverse and inclusive. That's also what I would, my last thing that I would share. But yes, thank you so much for having me. I had such a good time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies, once again, for honoring us, our virtual stage today. To our viewers, if you are yes, you're all promising, actually. If you are a woman in tech or a female founder and would like to be featured on the show, please do reach out to us. If you're an investor and would like to tell us about what you're investing in and how you are committed to diversity, please do let us know. And we'll make sure that we find a way to feature you on the show. Once again, thank you all so much. And we'll see you very soon in one of the next episodes. Thank you so much.